T T T T T T T T T. T T T T T 1 1 T 1 T. Henry.
What are you using it for?
For this room.
Well,
For, yeah,
that's gained a lot higher. Are they matched in level though?
I have no idea. I just wanted to make sure it was all going into the right places. Yes, totally. T T 1 T T T. I've just turned it down.
Alright. There's one's really smashing it to the professor on there. So Linux 1.
They're both going to VMix.
Yeah, that's good. Recorder, Mac, so sound effects fine, everything fine. They're not going on stage really. Where are they going? Just what for?
They'll be using them in this room.
Oh, for the workshop shit.
Oh, I suppose for them.
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. I thought no, the other one's fully charged. I didn't. I thought you'd be able to open these with double A's.
The R1's like you kind of double A's. Tend to use.
So just on stage, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, look at this, the last day. So excited.
Yeah.
Dying.
Good morning, Synod. My name is Sarah Batts-Neal, and I will be your rail replacement chaplain for this morning's morning prayer. So would you please stand if you are able? O Lord, open our lips. Your faithful servants bless you. Blessed are you, sovereign God, creator of all. To you be glory and praise forever. You founded the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. In the fullness of time, you made us in your image, and in these last days, you have spoken to us in your Son, Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh. As we rejoice in the gift of your presence among us, let the light of your love always shine in our hearts. Your Spirit ever renew our lives, and your praises ever be on our lips. Blessed be God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Blessed be God forever.
The night has passed, and the day lies open before us. Let us pray with one heart and mind. As we rejoice in the gift of this new day, so may the light of your presence, O God, set our hearts on fire with love for you, now and forever. Amen. And we say verses from Psalm 37. Fret not because of evildoers. Be not jealous of those who do wrong. Trust in the Lord and be doing good. Dwell in the land and be nourished with truth.
Let your delight be in the Lord, and he will give you your heart's desire.
Commit your way to the Lord and put your trust in him, and he will bring it to pass.
He will make your righteousness as clear as the light, and your just dealing as the noonday.
Be still before the Lord and wait for him. Do not fret over those that prosper as they follow their evil schemes.
Refrain from anger and abandon wrath. Do not fret as you
for evildoers shall be cut off. But those who wait upon the Lord shall possess the land. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be forever. Amen. In the Lord I will rejoice. Let not be afraid. Lift up your voice, the Lord is near. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near.
A reading from Mark's Gospel. Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice, but a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that you may go, the demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone.
Would you please stand for the Benedictus? You promised, O God, to save us from our enemies, from the hands of all that hate us. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who has come to his people and set them free. Through his holy prophets, God promised of old to save us from our enemies, from the hands of all that hate us.
To show mercy to our ancestors and to remember his holy covenant.
This was the oath God swore to our father Abraham, to set us free from the hands of our enemies.
Free to worship him without fear, holy and righteous in his sight, all the days of our life.
And you, child, shall be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare his way.
To give his people knowledge of salvation, by forgiveness of all their sins.
In the tender compassion of our God, the dawn from on high shall break upon us.
Shine on those who dwell in darkness and the shadow of death, and to guide our feet into the way of peace.
Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and shall be forever. Amen. You promised, O God, to save us from our enemies, from the hands of all that hate us. God of all, we pray for the tasks and business of the day ahead. May your Holy Spirit guide us in our discussions. May we keep our ears open to listen well, our eyes on you, and love for our neighbours in our hearts. We pray for our world. We pray for wisdom, humility, and compassion in those who lead us locally, nationally, and globally. We pray for those who are anxious about today, for those who will spend their time in pain or in fear, living in conflict, living in poverty, or living in loneliness. On the day the Church remembers St. Scholastica, we pray for all learned women, for all those in religious communities, giving thanks for their lives of prayer and dedication to your service. In communion with all the saints, let us commend the world to the mercy and protection of God. O God, you know us to be set in the midst of so many and great dangers, that by reason of the frailty of our nature, we cannot always stand upright. Grant to us such strength and protection as may support us in all dangers, and carry us through all temptations, through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and preserve us from all evil, and keep us in eternal life. Amen. Let us bless the Lord.
Recording stopped.
Wrong because it feels like, if it doesn't feel like it's going to be helpful, then I'll stay stum. Yeah. But having slightly stood on the...
Good morning, Synod. Now we resume the standard agenda with dealing with governance, the report by the Governance Review Group. For this, you will need a number of items. First of all, GS 2249. It references GS 2239, which is the report itself, which we were which we had in our November papers for that meeting of General Synod. You will need order paper number 4, which sets out the main motion and the amendments. And also, you may wish to refer to notice paper number 3, which deals with the financial implications. So GS 2249, you might want to keep your eye on GS 2239 from last November, order paper 4 and NP3. With that amount of the business dealt with, I'd like to call upon the Bishop of Leeds to move the main motion, and he has up to 5 minutes. So I beg your pardon, has 10 minutes.
I won't need 10 minutes. Nick Baines, Bishop of Leeds, 22. And before I begin, can I just say how sorry we are that Jackie Phillips isn't here, who's been with us throughout the process, and we wish her well and a speedy recovery. And to welcome Sir David Liddington, who is chair of the project group going forward, who is here with us, and Mary Chapman, who is also on the review group. Now, back in November, I made a presentation to the Synod about the work and the recommendations of the Governance Review Group. At that stage, I didn't propose a motion, but I described the work we had done, the things we had learned from a multitude of focus groups, governance bodies, and individuals, and I outlined the direction of travel before answering members' questions. And this presentation, quite legitimate and deliberate presentation, followed a fringe meeting aimed at making space for more informal questioning. Now, I'm not going to rehearse here all the detail of the report. You've all read it. But I want to just underline a couple of the most important principles of all. First, the review group has not attempted to reform the governance of the Church of England. It's about reforming the governance structure of the NCIs. Underneath all the complexity of this subject, there's actually a really simple question. How do we best run those functions which the Church needs at national level? Now, the answers aren't easy or obvious, but that question really is. So as we debate, let's not lose sight of that. Now, a related point is, what do we actually mean by running things well? The review group's recommendations were about rationalisation, simplification, and clarification. And a number of responses indicate that some people have caught the whiff of centralisation. But I would respectfully suggest that the opposite is true. The ultimate goal is to make clearer who makes decisions and how. In the end, it's about accountability, which depends on both transparency and accessibility, optimizing accountability for the good of the whole. Now, during the presentation and our fringe meeting in November, and in correspondence we've received since then, you have continued to take this subject seriously, for which we're very grateful. We've received a good deal of gratitude for taking on this complex task, general support for our motivations and broad recommendations, and some healthy skepticism about some of the detail. What we've not received, not once, is a suggestion that things are fine as they are, or that reform is not necessary. Now, I said in my opening remarks in November that it was not patently obvious to everyone how the polity of the Church of England works. Now, the barely suppressed laughter in the chamber, no, laughter, not laughter, laughter in the chamber, suggested that my observation was right. But please don't attribute any confusion you personally might feel to being a new member of a new synod. I can assure you that even the most experienced individuals and groups right across the church structures find the current structure complex, sometimes bewildering, and certainly impossible to describe succinctly to the person in the pew, let alone the person in the street. So it's very clear to me that the type of reform suggested in GS 2239 is necessary. At the same time, I'm confident, and I've said so openly, that the review group didn't get every detail right first time. If the answers aren't all the right ones, then at least the question was. I commend the group for the immense amount and quality of work it did under huge constraints, for the huge experience and wisdom the members brought, and for the creative proposals they drew up. But we know that there is more work to do. So we now enter the next stage of the listening process. We don't ask you today to agree to all the specific proposals or recommendations. What we want is for you to affirm the general principles I've outlined and which were the backbone of the review group's report, and then to instruct the existing bodies to engage further with the church and state on the best ways of achieving this vision of a simpler, clearer, more effective, and more accountable governance structure before instigating draft legislation, which might come before Synod in 2023. That next stage of the process will be where we would, with your help, work out how to untie some of the knots in the initial proposals. Now, while the motion doesn't ask you to sign off on all of the detail, it does seek Synod's welcome of the review group's report. Now, this is important, because although we will absolutely continue to listen and improve the proposals, we really do need to move forward with agreement as to our goal. Because frankly, a package that has been butchered along the way will make the church no better off. And we've made that mistake before. This is why we're here again 25 years later. So I reiterate those opening points. Things are not currently the best they could be. That's understatement. We need to change them, and we need to change them in ways that increase accountability, transparency, simplicity, clarity, and effectiveness. Now, a clear welcome today will be very beneficial to those who take up the baton. I will shortly hand over responsibility for the governance work to the Bishop of Guildford. And the group that he will then convene, should you pass this motion today, will be greatly assisted by a proposed reference group made up of entirely of experienced synod members who will have volunteered their expertise, and we're very grateful for that. They, being members of a new synod, will be able to see this process through to its conclusion. This gives me confidence that we can avoid the unfortunate fate of the previous attempt at governance reform 25 or so years ago. Now, we will be in the sweet spot when the authors of the original report are open to ideas, and we've made that clear all the way through, when critics of the proposals contribute plausible alternatives, where we all move forward together around a clear plan, notwithstanding the number of issues that will inevitably need further work and improvement. As I said in November, there's little advantage to anyone in spotting the gaps without offering improvements and solutions. Although not everyone welcomed that, I make that statement again. Therefore, in that spirit of constructive openness, I and my colleagues eagerly await members' contributions, and I hope to secure your welcome of the Governance Review Group's report and your invitation to the Archbishop's Council to introduce draft legislation after they and the Church Commissioners have performed the further engagement described as Part B of the motion before you. I therefore move the motion which stands in my name.
Thank you. The motion is now open for debate. I call Nigel Bacon, followed by Andrew Dochin. Thank you. And the speech limit from the outset will be 3 minutes because there's quite a lot of people put in to say they would like to speak. So we will start with 3 minutes and continue with 3 minutes. Thank you.
Nigel Bacon, Lincoln 342. Thank you, Chair, for calling me. I do welcome the studied approach that is summarised in GS 2249 and by the Bishop of Leeds, and for the approach that is proposed in implementing the recommendations that we received back in November from the Governance Review Group. Those recommendations envisage a broad sweep of reform, and there should be significant benefits in reforming governance and bringing together the currently separate decision-making entities into the proposed Church of England National Services, or SENS. Being able to discuss all aspects of mission and money together at the same time and in the same room, be it real or virtual, is critical. And there are real opportunities here to improve the quality and velocity of decision-making and also its transparency. The challenge, of course, is the complexity of the web of legislation, stakeholders, organisational structure and committees that will have to be unravelled, rationalised, simplified and reformed. And inevitably, the devil will be in the detail, and it's essential that we get it right if the changes are to be effective and to endure. And so I do ask those who will take on the challenge of taking the recommendations forward to resist any pressure for quick reform and to take the time to work through the details, to examine them carefully, to consult widely, to do the risk analyses and to ask those important questions: what if? What could happen? And by answering those questions honestly, that will help us future-proof the changes and so avoid the need to have to repeat the exercise in, say, 10 years' time. And recognizing that almost always in consolidating organizations, there is a tendency to overlay centralized power, and I think the Bishop of Leeds recognizes that danger. It should be resisted. I do encourage that instead that we use this as an opportunity to increase subsidiarity. My biggest concern is with the reforms potentially of General Synod. Yes, there is an opportunity to improve our working, but SENS, if not powerful, will certainly be more competent and stronger than the existing structure. And so with that in mind, reform must not be allowed to diminish the role of General Synod or allow it to be circumvented. In fact, in forming SENS as a more effective structure, it's essential to ensure that General Synod is strong enough to be able to hold it to account and to provide constructive challenge and support, the constructive challenge and support it will deserve as a servant organisation that will exist to support God's church, God's people, and above all, God's mission. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Andrew Dochin, and after him, the person at the very back there. I'm sorry, I can't really see, not least because you're quite reasonably wearing a mask. That doesn't help identify people. But thank you, if you would be next.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Dochin, 208 St Edmundsbury in Ipswich. I need to declare an interest in that I am part of the reference panel for the review group. I would strongly support acceptance of this report and encourage Synod to not tinker too much with it now. If you have concerns, please pass them on to the review group. This is a work in progress, and it will help us be us better. Why I'm supporting this is this review will help us remove the working in silos that so often happens within NCISs. And also, because they are set apart as separate institutions, they tend to end up with mission creep, and we find duplication along the way. And also, as in academia with the publish or perish paradigm, there can be a tendency for work streams to be self-perpetuating. This review seeks a balance between elected members and those with skills by widening the net of those most able to serve. I'm particularly attracted by the idea there's not just the House of Bishops who will have to carry all the episcopal weight, but extending their pool to the whole college. I don't know about you, but when I look at an election for anything, I look at the profile of the person. And the devil in me doesn't always look at their skills. I slip into, I am of Cephas, I am of Paul, I am of Apollos, and even because it's me, I'm of Christ. And I tend to vote for people who think like me, not necessarily vote with people who have the skills. This work will help that not happen, so I'd strongly resist my friend Prudence Daly's amendment this morning. The church house staff are run ragged with the current system, and they deserve a better way of working. And finally, this makes our governance simpler, more transparent, less wieldy, and ultimately less expensive. Thank you.
Thank you. After the next speaker, Chris Blunt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Claire Williams, Norwich 372. Point 8 in the report talks of an extensive process of listening and engagement. In light of questions 42 and 43 last night regarding CEYC, I would ask that this process meaningfully engages with the voices of young people. In Annex 2 of GS 2239, CEYC reps are listed as consultees as part of focus groups. How can we continue to include this representation? While at first glance the topic of governance may seem the most dull and legalistic topic, which is of little relevance to young people, this legislative process will have an effect on the church into which these young people will grow as leaders. In terms of stakeholders, while I understand that there are formal stakeholders which are integral, I believe that young people must form part of this consultative process. It is my hope that this process might involve young people who are already actively involved in our church communities, who are already seeking to be part of governance at a local level, and for whom the priority of making Christ known to our nation is already part of their daily life. There are those among us here who work with those young people day in and day out. Please ask us, please use us, and please together, let's really listen to these young people. And starting with this seemingly dull issue, let's make that a regular part of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris Blunt. And then after Chris Blunt, I'm minded to move on to start working our way through the amendments, and then we will return to the main debate after that. Thank you.
Chris Blunt, Chester 89. Thank you for calling me. I would really like to be able to wholeheartedly welcome this report, but there is just a really big nagging doubt, and I'm hoping you'll be able to clarify this for me. It looks as if there could be a massive shift in decision-making. I hear what you said about it not being about reform of church governance, but being about reform of church institution governance, but hidden in the middle of GS 2239, paragraphs 137 and 138, the proposed SENS organisation is described as a national vision and strategy setting body in paragraph 137, and in paragraph 138 it's described as the main Church of England governance body, setting the vision, values and mission strategy of the Church nationally and leading on key policy issues. The SENS would determine the strategic allocation of resources, and it goes on. It occurs to me that for Synod to welcome this report without clarification of that would be like the proverbial turkeys voting for Christmas. We are opening the door to handing over all of the vision and strategy stuff to an organisation which has already been described as supposed to be the servant of the church. So would it be possible for the proposed governing document of the SENS organisation, and actually the other organisations as well that are being proposed, to include that it exists to enact the will of Synod? If we can hear that made absolutely explicitly clear here in Synod, then I would welcome this report that's been given. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I should have said at the outset that that was a maiden speech. So a very useful contribution as a maiden speech. Thank you. I'd like to move on to the amendments which you have listed on your order paper, and there are 3. We will take them in order. Item 25, I invite the Reverend Sam McGuinness to move item 25. Thank you. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sam McGuinness, Chelmsford 83. I too must declare an interest. Like Andrew Dutchin, I have been invited to be part of the new reference group, and I am grateful to the Bishop of Guildford for that. On that basis, members of Synod, you may be surprised why I'm bringing 2 amendments to this motion this morning. I myself am surprised that I'm bringing 2 amendments to this motion. When I put my proposal to amend in on Tuesday, I put both this amendment and my other amendment in as one item, and therefore I would ask you all, when you are considering this first amendment, to read it in conjunction with my second, because what might seem a fine semantic argument about whether we welcome or whether we thank the reference group for its report, it has to be considered in conjunction with the need for Synod to receive a further report on the basis of the upcoming engagement exercise, because both of these amendments are based upon a single but important principle: the desire to ensure that Synod has a real opportunity to, and I quote Bishop Nick in GS 2249, a real opportunity to discuss, question and challenge proposals for fundamental reform of our national structures and how they support our dioceses and parishes. Members of Synod, the report of the Governance Review Group, GS 2239, is an important and impressive piece of work and expresses a clear and genuine intention to rationalise and simplify our central church structures to better enable the mission of God and the spread of the gospel in our dioceses and parishes. It has much to commend for itself. It is much that we should be thankful for. But, members of Synod, we must remember this is only the starting point of a complex process. These reforms go beyond legislative change and require an entirely new organisational and financial approach to how our central structures operate and relate to all levels of the Church. For this reason, I wholeheartedly support the next stage of stakeholder engagement proposed by Clause B of the current motion, but for exactly the same reason, I cannot accept that it is enough to limit this Synod's engagement to legislative review, or to welcome without further consideration the non-legislative reforms which may flow from those discussions. We just cannot predict at this stage where the various strands of this governance review are going to lead. So proper time and proper scrutiny must be given to all of them by this chamber. It would be a weighty task even for a seasoned synod, before we recall that the vast majority of us, myself included, are still getting to grips with synodical process and the scope of the decisions we are called on to make. We only have one shot at this, and we need to get it right. And therefore, Synod must be allowed to hear and debate the outcome of the next consultation stage, its legal, structural and financial implications, before we approve any detailed changes to the national structures of the Church of England. Now, I will say more in my second amendment, but therefore I ask you once again in Synod, please do not consider this amendment in isolation. Consider it alongside my further amendment and give this chamber the opportunity to perform its full representative role of our parishes and dioceses in making the mission of God's Church in this land more effective and sustainable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. The First Amendment, item 25, has been put, and so I invite contributions. I beg your pardon, I invite the Bishop of Leeds to respond. It's not my good day today. I invite the Bishop of Leeds to respond.
Thank you, Sam McGuinness, for this. Well, it's not my fault. Now you probably regret it. You do give me a slight problem because you've spoken to two amendments, and what I would want to say is in response to both. And I don't think I can do that at this point, so I'll need to come back. Number 27. But let me make this point. This is not, what is proposed is not limiting the Synod to legislative reform only, but that's part of a wider process. I would expect, and the Bishop of Guildford concurs with this, that regular reports would be coming to the Synod anyway as we go forward. But it's in the drafting of legislation, not that legislation will go through. That's when a lot of the stuff gets flushed out, because you have to put into writing what you expect to happen and what the shape will be. So it's serious attention to the detail of that actually flushes out what is possible, what is desirable, and what isn't. And personally, I think we ought to do more of it in Synod. Actually, get some drafted stuff so you've got something that you can work on. Now, this particular amendment wants to change welcome to thank. Obviously, I'm going to resist it because I've already asked the Synod to welcome the report as the starting point of a much more open consultation. And I still want to urge that the Synod welcomes rather than thanks.
Thank you. Synod has heard that has been resisted, and therefore it will lapse unless at least 25 people indicate by standing or otherwise raising their hand, as may be appropriate for them, that they wish to continue with the debate. Do I see 25 signifying? I think we ought to count. It looks as if the answer is yes. There's more than 25, so we have people on Zoom who've also indicated, and we've taken that into account as well. So we continue with debating the Amendment 25, therefore. It is only Amendment 25 that we're debating. We're not debating Amendment 27 at this point. We're just looking at Amendment 25. Thank you. We are still on the 3-minute speech limit that is maintained consistently for the time being.
Thank you, Chair. Clive Scowen, London 358. I want warmly to support this amendment. It is right that we should thank those who have done an enormous piece of work. But the fact that we're grateful for that work and take it seriously does not mean that we necessarily have to welcome it at this stage. And welcome is a very ambiguous word. And those of us who've been on Synod for a while have come across occasions when we've said something like that, welcome, without, dotting every I and crossing every T. And then later we're told, oh, well, you've already agreed the principle. Can't go back on that now. And I don't think we're ready to agree the principle of anything at this stage. We want to talk more. We want to be engaged. We want to see what other options might be. before we get to the stage where we can actually say, in effect, we want legislation to be prepared in a particular way. So I think thank is the right word for where we are at this stage, particularly as a new synod with a lot of new members. And we do want that opportunity. I'm very grateful for the reference group. I think that's a really good idea. Really grateful for the willingness of the Bishop of Guildford to take this on. There's a lot to be thankful for. And we've certainly got to engage with this. We can't just stay as we are. But what we can't do either is to say something must be done, this is something, therefore this must be done. And there are other things which could be put forward as well. So it's a simple point, really. But I mean, one thing that we've really got to engage with is this balance between governance and the trusteeship on the one hand, and representation on the other, and how you make up bodies that take important policy decisions. And that's a vital principle that has got to be engaged with before we get anywhere near legislation. So I would urge Synod to support this amendment, and indeed the third amendment when it comes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm inclined to take one more speech on this amendment, bearing in mind that we've got other amendments to work through. Yes, please. Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Yes, thank you.
Hello, Luke Appleton, 309 Exeter. I think that there are lots of concerns within the body of Synod, and I would share these concerns, that some of these proposals will lead to the sidelining and marginalising of Synod or the reduction in terms of the democraticness of it. What a wonderful step to addressing that this motion would be, in saying that actually Synod is going to really have teeth. We're not a rubber stamping body. We're going to thank you
Can
for
I
it.
remind you that we're debating item 25?
But the removal of the paragraph A, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly, that's what I'm talking about. And I think that amendment would be a really good step to addressing that. Thank you. So I would support it. And
before we close this, in the interest of fairness, I wonder if there's anyone who wishes to speak against this. Simon Butler is waving furiously from the corner, so we'll have him.
Sorry, Simon Butler, Southwark 221. So I wasn't expecting to speak, but I think I just need to, wearing my hat as chair of the Archbishop's Council Legislative Reform Committee. This is a relatively new committee that exists, if I can put it this way, partly to deal with the interface between legislation and politics and policy. And it's our job on behalf of the Council, and as far as I'm aware from our terms of reference, it's our job to ensure that legislation that comes to this synod in due course will in fact have been properly consulted on and engaged with. And chief among that, my concerns, is that, that this synod is properly engaged with. And you can see how we're beginning to do that in respect of the mission and pastoral measure, which is the first major piece of legislation that we're engaging with in this way under our new terms of reference given by the Council. And I think that would help Synod to realise that this isn't a binary thing between consultation and riding roughshod over this Synod. It's actually the sort of process that the Bishop of Leeds has outlined, a genuinely serious, humble, bolder approach to the way we conduct our business. So I want to reassure Synod that as I ask you to reject this amendment, your welcome does not mean you will be rubber stamping it, and you can hold me and the Legislative Reform Committee to account to ensure that that does not happen. So I ask you to reject this amendment and in due course Sam's second one as well. They're not necessary, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else standing, so I propose that we now take the item 25 and put it to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Are you counting? All those against, please show. I think for comfort, it would be wise to do a counted vote of the whole synod. That should satisfy people, I think. This is a counted vote of the whole synod on item 25. Those present at Church House using the voting handsets and who wish to vote in favour should press 1. Those against should press 2, and those who wish to record an abstention should press 3. Those participating remotely should use the online voting platform and vote or register an abstention using the buttons on the screen. Point of order.
Could you please clarify that we're voting in favour of the amendment or against the amendment?
Amendment is what we're dealing with. If you are in favour of the amendment, you vote yes. If you are against the amendment, you vote no. And the amendment you're voting on is the one that says that you leave out paragraph A and insert thank the Governance Review Group for its work, etc., etc. It's the change of that particular bit of opening wording that we're voting on at this point. Yes. Sorry, could you go to the podium because some people are struggling to hear. I can hear you, but I don't think everybody can. It's the effects of acoustics in a circular room.
Madam Chairman, Stuart 5 Carlisle 077. The Synod app hasn't been successful in updating the notice papers on everybody's devices. Would it be possible to display Mr McGuinness's amendments on the screen so we can be clear what we're voting for?
I don't know the answer to that. I will see what... well, William Nye is waving the order paper. It's all on here. We...
Point of order. It's on the app. I just don't want to say that. They're probably going to say it.
We do not have the staff to. We do not have the staff to do this or the capacity to do it at request at this point. So I'm afraid I have to say, would you please check with a neighbour or as soon as you get the chance later on in the day, make sure you pick up order papers from the information desk. And I hope that you can look over someone's shoulder to see what the wording is. The wording is what we're voting on is that whereas the original motion says that this synod welcomes the report of the governance review group, the revised wording that is the subject of the agenda says that you leave that out and instead say thank the governance review group for its work in preparing the report GS 2239 and its chair for update note GS 2249. So basically we're voting on changing welcome to thank. No, that sounds a little bit obscure, but we are. That is basically what the agenda is. And we will get, I've just been notified that we will get order papers brought to the chamber for the follow-on, the further amendments. We have already announced that a vote is underway and we cannot, I've been advised, take further points of order once a vote is already in train. And so I'm going to turn to the registrar to ask him to do the formal announcement about timings and so on.
The voting period is now open and will end in 1 minute. The voting period will end in 15 seconds. The voting period has now ended.
The results of the counted vote are in relation to item 25, a counted vote of the whole synod. In favour, 162, against 154, recorded abstentions 10, so the amendment is carried. We proceed directly to item 26, which is an amendment proposed by Prudence Daly I invite her to move the amendment, item 26. She has up to 5 minutes to propose the amendment. Thank you.
Prudence Daly, 376 Oxford. So for the avoidance of doubt, the text of my amendment is to request that any proposal for the establishment of a nominations committee be withdrawn. And my objection to the proposal for a nominations committee is fundamentally that it will undermine the democratic processes of this synod and replace them with something that is profoundly technocratic. Now, we already have a system in which people are appointed to committees in order to bring various skills and experience that is needed, and of course that should continue. But at the moment, where positions are elected, then it is for this synod to choose to elect anybody who fulfills the technical criteria, the objective criteria for eligibility to stand for that post. Under this proposal for a nominations committee, and I refer to paragraph 199 in GS 2239, it says, for an elected appointment, the nominations panel should sift those wishing to stand in advance of the election in order to verify that they have the appropriate skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviour. So, and particularly note that word behaviour, because I'll be coming back to that. So this isn't just saying, you know, this person needs to be an accountant or this person needs to be a lawyer. This is actually sifting of individuals. You know, is this the right kind of chap? Is this the right type of woman that we need for this post? And aside from the fact that I believe that's against natural justice, I believe that anybody who is eligible to stand for election ought to be put before the synod. I have a particular concern that those who might be inclined to rock the boat would be excluded. And I think we can all think of occasions on which the boat needed to be rocked in this church and it was resisted by the establishment. For example, safeguarding is an obvious case in point. And I'm sure we will be told that that will not happen. But I have to ask you, Synod, you know, are the people who are doing this sifting, or would they be human beings or not? You know, would they be fallible and subject to the temptation to exclude people who might rock the boat, whose behaviours might not be what they wanted to see on that particular committee? And we're told that this pre-election sifting should not be so onerous to remove democracy. Unfortunately, you can't make it not so just by saying that it won't be so. You know, and so my concern is that this nominations committee would be just too powerful. Yes, of course, we need some kind of appointments committee to make appointments as we have now, but not this committee that's going to sift candidates for election before you, members of Synod, even get the chance to cast your votes. Whilst attempting to promote demographic diversity, such a committee, I'm convinced, would risk impeding diversity of thought. And I want to ask you, members of Synod, do you wish to have the ability to elect whomsoever you wish to positions of governance within this church? And if you do, I would beg you please to support my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon the Bishop of Leeds to respond.
Thank you. I mean, that point has been heard. It was heard in November very clearly, but I cheerfully resist the amendment. The we're saying two things. One is the Church of England an exception to any other charity that is taking seriously its ability to have people on its board that enable it to fulfill its proper function in charity law? We clearly don't, in simply having elections, guarantee the sort of diversity that, listen to Paul Boateng the other day, Lord Boateng. You know, if we got this right, I might be sympathetic. But the point at the moment is, and I want to resist this on these grounds, the amendment itself requests that any proposal, well, the answer to a request might be no. So it's a pointless amendment in terms of its functionality. The second thing is that this is precisely the sort of issue and detail that is on the table for the work going forward. Now, the question is still on the table. What we were trying to do as a review group was answer the question, how do we better guarantee the right functionality of this body? I think I said in November, I'm not going to stand up here and say we've got that right. But the question has not gone away. So leaving this in there, because we haven't picked apart any of the other recommendations, and we're not asking you to agree to all the recommendations today. We're saying take this as having addressed the right questions, and then as you go forward, and especially as I said earlier, when you start to draft the words of things, you begin to work out what is viable, what is desirable, and what isn't. But you don't chop off the discussion at this point. But I come back to what I said, that the point has been heard, and it's one of the things that needs to be taken forward, but the question has not gone away. So as that work proceeds and the Synod engages with it and how best to resolve this issue, then is the opportunity for constructive alternatives to be put in. And for the objections, which I hear very clearly and which Prudence has articulated, they can be brought in and the Synod can take a view on it as we go forward. But I resist the amendment at this stage.
Thank you. Since the proposer of the main motion has resisted this amendment, it will not go forward unless up to 25 people or more indicate by standing, raising their hand, that they wish it to continue. So if we see 25 people wishing to continue to debate this, we will do so. Otherwise, it will lapse. Well, we've clearly got 25, so we will continue to debate this. So the amendment that has been moved by Prudence Daly, item 26 on the order paper, is now open for debate. Yes, please. Sorry, it's been people buried.
Philip North, number 53, Suffragan Bishops. We cannot clap Paul Boateng 2 days ago and support this amendment. It's as simple as that. And I would urge Synod very strongly, please, to resist it. There are too many unheard voices in the Church of England. We don't hear the voices of working class people. We don't hear the voices of UKME people. We barely hear the voices of those with disabilities. I could go on and on. These voices are invisible in our church. Every organisation, political parties, companies, charities, needs to act to ensure that the silenced voices are heard. And this is a mechanism for doing just that. We can't clap Paul Boateng 2 days ago and support this amendment today. Please, I would urge you to resist it strongly.
Jamie Harrison, and then after Jamie Harrison, Debbie Buggs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I on? Jamie Harrison, Durham 301. I thought it might help the Synod just to have a bit of a historical reflection for us really old stagers who were actually here in 1995, very new Synod, and struck onward in the Turnbull report, which became Working as One Body, which formed the National Institutions Measure of 1998. I see Mary was there too. Hello, Mary. I think there were 10 of us who were there, including the Bishop of Leeds. So we old stagers have been here before, and I'm worried about the anxiety in the chamber about this. If you think we started Working as One Body with a very big report from Michael Turnbull, my bishop, Bishop of Durham, in that there was draft legislation in that report that we were actually facing in those days. And if we come to this and complete it, it will not come into actual practical outcome until at least January 2024 and quite possibly January 2025. That's the distance we've got to go as a synod. So a few comments really, and I'm resisting on this basis, on a procedural basis, if you like, intervening at this point on something that needs, I think we can resist it later. There's plenty of time actually to do that from a governance perspective. I'm on the project board with others, chaired by Sir David Liddington, as we've heard, and the wonderful Mary Chapman is coming back from her work as formerly on synod to do that. And I want to say in those debates of 1995, exactly these issues were raised, particularly the one around representation from this synod. Initially, we started with a certain number of people representing the synod by election ex officio, like me on Archbishop's Council. In time, that was shifted, rightly or wrongly. And what this is trying to do is to think about how do we build a trustee body that is both representative of this synod, but also, as we've just heard from the Bishop of Burnley, involving others with competency, capability, diversity, and so on. So 3 quick things. This trustee body has to look and perform correctly. And as yet, we don't know what that will look like. It takes time to think that through. A nominations committee is one option, but as we heard from the Bishop of Leeds, it's not the only option, and we'll have time. And I don't like this slowing down issue. I'm going back to James Carey's view of the train yesterday. The train is leaving the station. It's just getting going. This amendment wants to disconnect one of those carriages and put it into a siding and say that's not ever going to come back. And I think the next amendment also risks that by slowing everything down and saying we can't even look at draft legislation until who knows when. Whereas at least with draft legislation, I know the word draft, we can actually look at it and say, we like that, we don't like that, we want to amend that. That's what we're here for as a legislative body. So I do want to say, yes, I hear the problems, I hear the issues. Prudence quite correctly brings them to us, but I think she's bringing them too soon. I want to see the thing fleshed out much more so we can have a really good and in-depth conversation. It's great we've got the reference group. We've heard 2 of those speakers already. That's really helpful. So I do ask you at this stage to let the train take up a bit of speed, to have not disconnected carriages and not too restrictive. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Buggs, and then I don't know what she's going to say, of course, but I will probably be minded to propose a motion for closure on this item, bearing in mind the pressures of time. We'll see.
Debbie Buggs, London 353. I support this amendment. Of course we can clap for Paul Boateng and support this amendment. Prudence has told us, highlighted, that it's behaviours that are one of the filtering mechanisms. What do we mean by behaviours? Do we want the middle-class behaviours that make this such a, let's face it, exclusive gathering? Or do we want different behaviours that we find slightly uncomfortable? Well, a nominations committee, as Prudence says, will, I think, lead to making the appointments process blander, more bureaucratic, more technocratic. We want a variety of voices. We believe in democracy. Let's just let democracy do its job rather than have it manipulated by a filtering body.
Thank you. As I indicated, I now wish to test the mind on whether item 26 has been sufficiently debated. I understand that phrase is difficult because we could have debate for a long, long time. But in terms of the practicalities of the framework we're operating with, in terms of pressures of time and so on. So I now wish to test the mind of Synod on whether item 26 has been sufficiently debated. And I therefore put the motion for closure on item 26. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. So the motion for closure is carried, and therefore we can proceed to a vote. Point of order. No. Prudence, we've already closed the vote, so you can't raise a point of order. The item has closed, yes. So.
Well, perhaps if I, Madam Chairman, if I tell you what I was going to say, and then you can tell me if it was in order. Prudence Daly, 376 Oxford. I was going to ask if we could have a vote of the whole synod on my amendment.
I'm perfectly happy to do that. We can have a vote of the whole synod on the amendment. That's fine. Let's do that. We will have a vote of an electronic vote of the whole synod. So it will be a counted vote of the whole synod on item 26. Those present at Church House using the voting handsets who wish to vote in favour should press 1. Those against should press 2. Those who wish to record an abstention should press 3. Those participating remotely should use the online voting platform and vote or register an abstention using the buttons on the screen. And we are voting on item 26, that is the amendment which requests that any proposal for the establishment of a nominations committee be withdrawn. That's the amendment that we're voting on.
The voting period is now open and will end in 1 minute. The voting period will end in 15 seconds. The voting period has now ended.
Before I read out the results, and without prejudice to whatever the results may be, because I haven't actually looked at the figures myself yet, I've got them covered up. I've been asked to remind all of us, that it is the practice of this synod not to clap after votes are announced. We did so last time. We should not do so from now on, we remind ourselves. I'm now going to uncover it. I feel like a bit like a wizard here. I'm going to uncover it and tell you the results. The counted vote of the whole synod is as follows. In favour, 124. Against, 199. Recorded abstentions, 24. The amendment was therefore lost. No clapping. If you wished to, but don't. We now move on to the amendment item 27, and I call upon the Reverend Sam McGuinness to move item 27. He has 5 minutes. Subsequent speeches still remain at 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for calling me to make this second amendment. Thank you also, members of Synod, for carrying my first amendment, which, as I said, has to be taken in conjunction with this further amendment. I'm not going to be complacent, but I think we now have the mood of the Chamber that we all agree that these matters are fundamental to the future mission and ministry of the Church of England, and that Synod needs to be given its full and proper function in discussing, questioning and challenging whatever proposals are eventually put forward. And not just in legislation. As I said, the implications of this governance review work cover so many other matters: structural, organisational, financial, and how our future central church structures relate to the Church of England and indeed to this nation at all levels. Bishop Nick and other voices said earlier that Synod will be given engagement throughout this process. Give us proper engagement. Allow us to perform our full function as the representative voice of our parishes and dioceses, as we have been elected here by the faithful throughout the Church of England. By the time we get to legislative measures, it will be too late. We just cannot predict at this stage where the various strands of the governance review are going to lead us. And as I said, members of Synod, 2/3 of us almost are new to this role, are new to this responsibility. And therefore, we must properly scrutinise all of these matters, these proposals, before we approve any detailed changes to our national structures. It is not enough to put the progress of this work into a GS MISC paper. It is not enough for us to discuss them through presentations and group work. We need to be given a voice, the voice of those who have elected us to represent them at the national level. So, as we have already thanked the governance review work for its work in bringing the initial proposals to this Synod, and as we encourage the new project board and the reference group to go out and perform their listening exercises and to refine some proposals for us, let us therefore ensure that this Synod plays its proper role in the process, to await and debate a report on the outcomes of that wider engagement, so that our collective voice and wisdom from all our parishes, all our communities, with all of our backgrounds and all of our experience can be brought to bear on this process and help develop real and lasting structures that keep the rumour of God alive and the life-changing power of Christ's gospel throughout this land. Synod, please support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon the Bishop of Leeds to respond.
Guess what? I strongly resist this amendment because many of the assumptions underlying what Sam McGuinness has said, I think, are flawed. For example, he makes a statement, this is vital to the future. Well, of course it is. That's why we've done the report and why we've brought it to the Synod. The whole thing is vital to the future, and the question is about process. Now, what the group has said is that the process is one that needs to start, and it's as you get into that process that the proper debates happen. Why is there an assumption here that, how is it put, that the Synod wouldn't be fully involved in the process? The whole point is that Synod is fully involved in all the different elements. That it's too late when you get to the legislative stage? No, it's the drafting of legislation that forces the issues and flushes out the contradictions and the gaps. One of the real challenges of this governance work is how do you join up the different bits when you solve one problem that then creates a problem somewhere else? Now, you can discuss that forever, but at some point you've got to look at texts. And that's where the Synod comes into its own. Because the Synod can, at every stage of this, is able to look at what is being proposed and then do what a single group can't do and say, but hang on a minute, if you do that, what happens here? And then the group goes away and does some work on what that looks like. So it seems to me that this amendment is saying, let's just push it down the road a bit when we know we've got to get some momentum and engagement with these issues. They're not going away. Was it yesterday Meg Munn referred to the time it takes for the church to do things as like building a cathedral? Well, this is not assuming that this has got to be rushed through. It is about getting the process right in a timely way. I feel sometimes, it's like when you have a building project, whatever the architect and the builders tell you, double the cost and triple the time. That will have to be flushed out as you go along, but we need to get the train moving. So I resist the amendment and leave it to the Synod to consider its view.
Thank you. We've heard that the proposer of the main motion has resisted this amendment. It will therefore lapse unless 25 or more people indicate that they wish the debate to continue. So I invite Synod to respond accordingly. If there are 25 people who indicate by standing, raising their hand, whatever, that we have got 25, clearly, so we will continue to debate this issue. I call upon Marcus Walker, and after Marcus Walker, Bishop Helen Ann Hartley for a maiden speech. Thank you.
Members of Synod, this report has so much that is... Oh, my name is the Reverend Marcus Walker, London 168. Apologies. This report has so much that is good about it. And as I'm sure you know, this is a part of the whole emerging church process, which different task forces have been set about considering over the last few years. The report itself sort of sits at the centre of this, but so many of the other elements of it are matters which have not been brought to the Synod and are matters which this Synod hasn't even had sight of. One of these was the Ely report on bishops, which is mentioned at least twice in the report, and upon which the future of our episcopally led and synodically governed church rests. This report, of course, was leaked to the Times on Monday, and courtesy of the Times, I have a copy of it here. A number of the interesting points, and there are so many more interesting points than a Brexit bishop, would change the entire shape of the church. Bishops having a 5 or 7 year time limit. Dioceses being merged into supergroups, with only 8 or 12 having diocesan powers and everybody else being an area bishop. The whole ecclesiology of our church would change if this report, which is only a consultation, is accepted. So many of the other elements of the emerging church have not yet reported, and yet this central element of it is based upon them. We should see all of it. We as a synod should be able to see the whole way in which the future of our church is being mapped out and decide accordingly. The analogy was made earlier of the train leaving the station. That's true, and in a slightly worrying way, because we haven't been told what the destination station is. And the trouble with the analogy of a train is it suggests that other people do know where it is, and yet we haven't been told. I'm not actually sure that's true. I think this consultation document will wind up being changed, amended, maybe thrown out, maybe fully endorsed. I don't know. You don't know. The College of Bishops doesn't know. It hasn't decided yet. We shouldn't be deciding on the core element, particularly as it rests on so many others, until we have sight of the whole. And so I would like to support this amendment and invite the reporting group to go back and to look at everything, and then to allow us full sight of the end goal and an actual timetable with the final destination written in it before we get to legislation.
Thank you. Helen Ann Hartley next, and then Alison Coulter. Thank you.
Helen Ann Hartley, Suffragan Bishops, 51. Members of Synod, we don't need another governance report. We need to work with the one we've got and crack on. If I had to describe the current governance structures of the national institutions that enable the Church of England to engage in God's mission, it would be like convening a meeting here in Church House. You can just about find the entrance, but I would not give attendees instructions on how to find the actual meeting room. Rather like an escape room scenario, attendees would be given 45 minutes to complete the task of locating the meeting room. At various points, attendees would be given a series of clues, glimpses of how the Church's governance functions currently, indicating the whereabouts of their final destination, which would suggest that there are overlapping possibilities. There would be a few dead ends along the way, a stint of walking around in circles, and rumours about a mysterious sixth floor where only the brave venture, and opportunities for getting into a lift, but emerging in a completely unexpected area of the building or another building altogether. Solve all the clues and a warm welcome awaits in the meeting room, that is, if the eschaton hasn't arrived first. Our governance should be about enabling God's mission rather than hindering it. At this stage in the process, one of the enabling factors is this synod. We are being asked today to show our support for the direction of travel, anticipating that aspects of this support in the future will speak to and involve the synod's functions. However, this synod can also cause death by 1,000 amendments. Please let it not be that. It is only right and proper that we take seriously the treasure that has been entrusted to us, in order that we may both enable God's kingdom to grow and ensure that God's church is entrusted to generations that will follow. In all of this, God goes before us, even into the legislative detail and small print. Members of Synod, let us not pass over this opportunity. I urge you to support the motion presented before us in its fullness and reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison Coulter, and then after Alison Coulter, Kate Walton. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison Coulter, Winchester 428. Synod, as a member of the new Governance Review Board, I want to assure you of our commitment to listen to you. Like you, I am elected, and I know and value the importance of democracy. I and my fellow members of the Governance Review Board value you, our colleagues on the General Synod. Synod will be given time to shape the future. You will be given time to attend small group discussions so that we all understand together, to shape our thinking, to listen to one another. We will give you proper engagement, Sam. Synod's role is to write this legislation. It will not be too late because you will be doing it. It won't be done through group work or take-note debates either. It will be done through the painstaking work of legislation that those of us who've been on Synod for a while know and understand, and we look forward to involving you, our newer colleagues, in. Yes, you will have the opportunity to bring your collective voice and wisdom, and I don't feel it's entirely fair at this stage, before we've even had a chance to start our work as the Governance Review Board, to stop us. Friends, change is difficult, but if we want our church to be fit for the future, better able to serve our people and parishes, then we need to be a bit braver and to look at what best governance structures are. We've heard that what we have now is not working that well. Why are we so afraid to look at how to change it? Marcus, we don't know the destination, but that's because it's for all of us Synod together to decide where that is. Please, Synod, resist this amendment.
Kate Walton, and then after that, I would like to take one contribution from Zoom. We haven't had a contribution from Zoom so far, so I will call Esther Pryor to follow Kate Walton, and then I will be considering the possibility of a closure motion.
Thank you, Chair. Kate Walton, Liverpool 157. Synod, I also would urge you to resist this amendment. Like Alison, I am a member of the newly formed Governance Review Board, and I'm looking forward to that work going forward. Bishop Nick reminded us that the process must start if things are to change. Perhaps we're not trying to build a cathedral, but a consensus. I wonder whether we can learn from our excellent group work earlier today and allow the conversation to begin. I'll confess to you that the word I used in our Slido poll earlier about how I sometimes see those other people was distrustful. Perhaps there's a question here of trust and accountability. We are not called to be distrustful, but to interrogate, to discuss, and to discern through a process. Perhaps the difference here is between a train journey with a timetable and a destination fixed in advance, and the arriving together into a new place where none of us have been before, where a map must be drawn. Some of us will walk ahead and draw the unknown roads. Some of us will walk along them, and then as we go, we'll find the way together. Synod, I support this motion and ask you to resist this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not entirely clear to me now, as I look at my Zoom screen, whether Esther Pryor is available. Ah, she is. She's popped up. It's all right. Sorry. You know how Zoom moves things around on the screen, and I lost track of her as she moved into a different row and all the rest of it. So, Esther, I invite you to speak. Thank you. You still have the 3-minute time allowance. And then I will see where we stand with a possible motion for closure on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was slow to put my hand down because Alison spoke for me. So I just want to say I support. Please don't support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I wish to test the mind of Synod on whether item 27 has been sufficiently debated, and therefore I put the motion for closure on item 27. All those in favour, please show. I beg your pardon? I can't see who's made a point of order. On the way round, it's Mary. Right, okay.
Sorry, Mary Dowlacker, Chelmsford 272. Chair, we've heard a lot of speeches opposing the amendment. We've not had an opportunity to hear many in favour. In the interests of democracy, please could you revise that?
I'm happy to ask for another one. We have heard a speech in favour of the amendment, but we certainly can hear if there's someone. I'll take one more if someone wishes to. Yes, please.
Daniel Valentine, Manchester 173. Thank you, Madam Chair, for calling me for this, my maiden speech. I'm new to Synod, but a cradle Anglican, and much of my faith was learnt at Sunday school. I and many others will remember the song, "The wise man built his house upon the rock. The foolish man built his house upon the sand, and the rain came tumbling down." Well, Synod, it has rained. There have been allegations of abuse. There are concerns over clergy well-being. There is a financial crisis, and we have lived through a pandemic. And how clear it is that much of our house has been built upon the sand. The shifting sand of a lack of accountability, a lack of transparency, abuses of power, and a failure of proper checks and balances. Good governance is a first-order issue. It's about how we make good decisions. It's about where we place our priorities. It's about how we spend our money and how we hold ourselves accountable to others and to the mission of God. As a new member of Synod, I was pleased to be asked to be on the reference group for this governance review because of the particular skills I have as a lawyer practicing in this area. I am clear our system is broken, and I want to be part of fixing it. I was surprised, however, to discover at the first meeting of that reference group that the proposal was to move straight to drafting legislation. I was even more surprised to learn that that legislation would be steered through this synod by a project group with only one ordained voice on it, and that voice being the voice of a bishop. We have debated many important issues this week: slavery, racial justice and safeguarding. They will pale into insignificance if we do not get this right. We need proper time to debate the principle of this, not just whether there should be a colon or a semicolon. I invite you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I now wish to return to testing the mind of Synod on whether item 27 has been sufficiently debated, and I therefore put the motion for closure on item 27. It would be helpful if you could go to the podium, please. I know it's tedious, but it's much better.
I'm good at tedious. Sam Margrave, Coventry 295. Madam Chairman, if it might be with your indulgence, if we could have a vote of the whole House of Synod so that we can record the intention of members so that people out there know what our views are.
Thank you. But that was my intention, but we haven't got there yet, so you don't know what's in my mind until I know whether you're prepared to allow me to move to that. So may I put the motion for closure on this amendment? All those in favour of closure, please show. All those against, please show. Thank you. That is clearly carried. And we proceed to a vote. And I am glad to be supported and prompted by Sam. But what I was going to say, I will say now. We have had close votes. It has not been easy. We will go for a counted vote on this, as we have done on the previous ones. So we will have a counted vote of the whole Synod. Thank you. So this is a counted vote of the whole Synod on item 27. Those present at Church House using the voting handsets and who wish to vote in favour should press 1. We're on the third amendment here. In favour should press 1. Those against should press 2. Those who wish to record an abstention should press 3. Those participating remotely should use the online voting platform and vote or register an abstention using the buttons on the screen. Thank you.
The voting period is now open and will end in 1 minute. The voting period will end in 15 seconds. The voting period has now ended. Now remember the rule, we receive votes in silence. The counted vote of the whole synod in respect of item 27 is as follows. In favour, 150. Against, 185. Recorded abstentions, 16. The amendment was consequently lost. We now return to the main debate. We have very little time, obviously, but I would like to allow perhaps 2 speeches on the main debate before I invite the Bishop of Leeds to sum up. And I will reduce the speech limit to 2 minutes. If there is anyone who wishes to speak on the main motion, Bishop of Coventry and the person behind the Bishop of Manchester. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. 2 minutes, yeah.
Coventry 14, thank you for calling me. I simply want to encourage the project group in the theological character of their work. This next stage is not about, as the report states, simply nuts and bolts. The project group and Synod itself will be engaged in what Bishop of Leeds referred to in the sort of style of Richard Hooker as ecclesiastical polity. Hooker believed in the divine calling of the church. He rooted his theology in the church's ecclesiology, in the great doctrines of God, of the incarnation of the Spirit active in the world, of the election of a people to enact the purposes of God. And so ecclesiastical polity for Hooker was the form, the shape, the structure the church took in a given place and time in order to order its life and make its decisions, to enable it to serve more fully God's purposes. Polity makes ecclesiology concrete and practical, and it thereby does nothing less than mediate God's redemption to the world. Hooker knew that polity doesn't just drop out of heaven as a blueprint for all times and places. It needs to be contextualized to present conditions. So he gladly drew on what he could discern of God's work in the world through the ordering of other institutions and bodies. And so the project group should feel confident in doing so as well, filtering the wisdom of the world through the ecclesiological integrity which the report sets as one of the criteria for the work ahead. Among the several areas requiring careful theological attention is calibrating rightly the interdependence and mutuality of which the report speaks, speaking specifically about the relationship between the local manifestation of the church in the diocese and the national church. There's much more I'd like to say, but I commend the theological work that is to be done.
Thank you. And then one more 2-minute speech before I think we have to be looking at closure, because there is another item of business, or there are 2 small items of business, important though they are, before lunch.
Thank you, Chair. Joseph de Walker, Archbishop's Council 468. I'm 2.5 years halfway through my time on the Archbishop's Council now, which has been fun, but at points has been a frustrating and frustrated experience, a feeling of policy or the execution of policy falling into the cracks between different NCIs, trustees getting the feeling that decisions are made elsewhere and then rushed to the council to be rubber stamped, or even of trustees being ignored or shouted at when objections or protests are raised. The real alarming point comes when, as I discovered as a member of the Governance Review Group, all the other statutory bodies and governance bodies seem to feel the same way too. So reform is necessary. I think this report goes some way to improving some of this, so do take note. I want to say 2 words about participation, how to populate any new board and committees. We appreciate that governance has to be representative of the church without being amateurish, and adequately skilled and competent to govern without becoming detached and technocratic. So as this moves from paper to concrete proposal, I have to say, sorry, no, that that's the balance, technocracy, skill, and representation. Most of the feedback that I've received, however, in consultation and in conversation, has not been that our governance bodies are incompetent or insufficiently skilled. You get a bit of that. There are areas where that rears its head. Far more powerful has been the feedback that our governance is detached, is unrepresentative, is remote from parishes, is remote from people at the coalface of Christian ministry. So, as this moves from paper to concrete proposal, I think it's important that the project board and the review group, which I'm also on, restates its commitment to clarifying and protecting the vital role that participation and representation play in the makeup of boards and committees.
I'm
that
afraid
means,
that your time
elections
has come to an end.
Yeah. Thank you.
I would at this point like to test the mind of Synod on closure of this item of business, and then I could return to the Bishop of Leeds and we could then proceed to the final vote on this item. Actually, I see no one standing, so we can proceed now then to invite the Bishop of Leeds to respond to the debate. You have up to 5 minutes to do that.
Thank you. I'll be brief.
Oh.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, there was a hand raised on Zoom. I beg your pardon. That still leaves me then in the position of asking if Synod is prepared to vote for closure. If those in favour of closure, please show. Those against, please show. There will be closure on this item, therefore, and consequently I do turn to the Bishop of Leeds.
Thank you. I'm not going to respond to every contribution, but I do want to say this. I'm grateful that when I stick my little card into the machine, it says, "Welcome, Baines." Just sorry that at the end it doesn't say, "Thank you, Baines," just to make the whole thing complete. To respond to some of the important points made in this debate, and one clarification to Marcus Walker. Actually, the governance review preceded all the emerging church stuff. It came out of the, as I said in November, out of the Church Buildings Council review, which just showed up how unjoined up the whole thing is. And there are casualties, human casualties, ministry casualties as well when that happens. So it preceded, although it's been drawn in sometimes in documents into the emerging church work. I want to thank the Governance Review Group and the Synod for the seriousness with which this has been addressed since November and again today. The points that have been made have been noted. I heard that governance is a first order issue. I think we have to interpret that, David Valentine, because some people would make it, or have a very limited view of what first order issue means. But to endorse what the Bishop of Coventry said, the ecclesiastical polity is essential, and the theological input to this is vital. And we did do some theological work as we came to this point. I do note, though, that Richard Hooker gets quoted in support of any argument in any circumstance in relation to any polity. So slightly dodgy on that one. Claire Williams, the CEYC, I'm sorry that you think this is a dull issue. It obviously gets the juices flowing for lots of people. But I can tell you that the project group intends, if they haven't done so already, to have a member of the CEYC on that group. And I hope that they will provide a conduit to those voices, or on the reference group, I think it is. What we've identified is that there are silos in the church's governance, and what happens when you have silos is that the powermongers play within the cracks. That's the problem we have, because if you don't have coherence and consistency, it's the people who know how to play the game who play within the gaps, within the cracks. And that's what this is intended to get beyond. And as the process goes forward, we need to see how we can best do that. And my guess is, if it's a good process, that will develop and evolve as we go through it. But we have to have our feet held to the fire, as Paul Boateng said, if we're going to do it. Otherwise, we'll still be here in 5 years' time saying what a terrible problem we have, and we haven't done anything about it. So I just want to say one more thing. The project group will be setting out as its first job how to set out the process. And Synod and others will be involved. And if you don't like the process, pitch in. If you have views on elements of it, you want to help set their agenda, write in. That's the job of the Synod, not just to do it when we're meeting in session. But the bit I want to add, there's a bit, I'm a bit sensitive of how I put this. Governance review has a big impact on staff. A church house, who we heard earlier are run ragged by the current incoherence. And we need to bear them in mind and in our prayers, because they face uncertainty. It's another reason why we need to get moving on it. So do the church commissioners. Policy, particularly in investment, is impacted by the certainty that can be given about the polity and governance of the institution. So that adds weight to what we're doing. So let me thank all those who have contributed. All points are noted. This is the beginning of a conversation and a process. I'm delighted that I can now be released to the 6th floor, and the Bishop of Guildford will be taking on the reference group, and Sir David Liddington, the project group. I commend this motion to the Synod.
Thank you. We proceed to a vote on this motion, and I propose that in the light of the fact that we've done all our electronic voting so far, that we do an electronic counted vote of the whole Synod in the same way for the main motion. It doesn't need supporting. The chair can make the ruling, and I have just made it.
Point of order. Emma Joy Gregory, 247. Do I not have the right to ask for a vote by houses at this point?
You may. We're just checking the rules. At least I'm checking the rules for. In principle, you may, but the process for that switch is. I'm about to be advised.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
It is possible to do that, but we need 25 members to support that, to stand or otherwise raise their hands, for us to have a counted vote by houses. It's definitely it, yes. So we will do a counted vote, which is what I was expecting us to do anyway, but it will be done by houses and not as a count of the whole Synod. So this is a counted vote of the Synod by houses. I'm sure I have to say that. I'm being given the words. This is a counted vote by houses on item 15, those present at Church House using the voting handsets and who wish to vote in favour should press 1. Those against should press 2. Those who wish to record an abstention should press 3. Those participating remotely should use the online voting platform and vote or register an abstention using the buttons on the screen. And this is a vote by houses on item 15, the main motion, as amended, because we did actually amend the first phrase. I'm told that I have the discretion to dispense with the bell. So it's very exciting. I've never dispensed with a bell before. So I am going to do just that. We will simply proceed to the vote and the registrar will give us the timings.
The voting period is now open and will end in 1 minute. The voting period will end in 15 seconds. The voting period has now ended.
The results of the counted vote by houses on item 15 is as follows. House of Bishops in favour 30, against 0, recorded abstentions 0. House of Clergy in favour 126, against 18, recorded abstentions 5. House of Laity in favour 110, against 53, recorded abstentions 6. The motion is therefore carried because it has been carried in all 3 houses. Thank you. That concludes this item of business. There are 2 small but important items of business to be completed before lunch, so please do remain in the chamber for those. Synod, apologies that I didn't do this yesterday when I was first chairing. I am Libby Lane, Bishop of Derby 015. In order that we may conclude the items of business set for before lunch, I need to seek the consent of Synod to extend this sitting by up to 15 minutes if we need it, and I hope we won't. But if we do, I need to seek your consent to do that. May I have indication by show of hands or green ticks that if we need to use an extra 15 minutes, we can do so. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show by show of hands or red crosses on Zoom. Thank you, Synod. You have given that consent should we need to use that extra time. So we come to item 16. As we come to that, I just need to point out that on notice paper 4, our archbishops have been swapped over. In fact, it will be the Archbishop of York who will move item 16 and the Archbishop of Canterbury who will move item 17. Members will need for item 16 GS 2250. And I invite the Archbishop of York to speak to item 16. You have up to 10 minutes, but I hope you won't need them all.
Stephen Cottrell, Archbishop of York 002. Thank you. Friends, you'll have read GS 2250, so you'll know what we're doing. I'm missing out my first couple of paragraphs. So, as seasoned members of Synod will be aware, Pete Spears has been a massively valued member of Synod, member of the panel of chairs, who's guided us at times through very challenging debates and has always shown good humour, fairness, impartiality, but neither any fear in challenging when necessary. These characteristics have also been put to use during his time as a central member of the Crown Nominations Commission. One of the key characteristics for those of us serving on the CNC, I include myself, is that ability to leave your preconceived ideas at the door and collectively seek to discern what is God saying to us. Why are these characteristics so important in this appointment? Because we are a wonderfully broad church, but in order to serve the whole nation, we need to get broader. And we need to ensure that every part of our church flourishes. And one of the ways we'll do this is to appoint the very best people to the various roles the Appointments Committee is responsible for, so that we can be a church that looks like the communities it serves, represents the different interests of the church, doing the kind of things Paul Batang was pleading with us to do the other day. And it's the chair of this committee who particularly holds this responsibility for us. Therefore, we need someone with vision, determination, fairness, and somebody who's got those gifts of discernment. And in this way, we will start to become the younger and more diverse church that we long to be. Archbishop Justin and I have consulted widely, particularly obviously with members of the appointment committee, and we simply believe that Pete Spears is the right person for the job. He is passionate to see the flourishing of God's church in all its fullness, and we have confidence that Pete will draw the very best out of the committee and help us to be the very best that we can be. Synod, I wholeheartedly endorse the motion standing in my name, look forward to any debate that may take place, but won't be disappointed if it doesn't. Do I need to move? No. Yes. Anyway, have I done what I need to do?
I think you have done what you need to do. Thank you. Members may now speak to this item if they wish. From the outset, any contribution will be limited to 3 minutes. I don't see anybody standing. Do we see anybody indicating online? In which case, we can move to the vote on item 16. We will do this by a show of hands in the chamber and by green ticks for approval or red crosses otherwise online. So, may I have indication of those in favour of item 16? Please show. Thank you. Those against in the chamber, please show. By red crosses online, please show. Thank you. That motion is passed. Our congratulations to Pete on his appointment. Thank you, colleagues. I will allow that was applause of congratulation to Pete on his appointment rather than a response to the vote. We now move to item 17, and I ask the Archbishop of Canterbury to speak to and move that item.
Dear friends, the chairs of the Diocese Commission are appointed by both archbishops, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to recommend to the Synod that Dame Caroline Spellman be reappointed as listed at item 17 on your agenda. The Synod approved the appointment of Dame Caroline originally at its meeting of 24th of April 2021 for a time-limited period up to 30th of April 2022. Both Archbishop Stephen and I would like to seek the approval of Synod to confirm her in post for the next session. Dame Caroline will be known to many of you as a distinguished parliamentarian, as Secretary of State, and lately as a Second Church Estates Commissioner, an office she relinquished after standing down as a Member of Parliament. Her almost unique set of talents and experience includes the last major local government reorganisation, which will prove invaluable to the Church and the Diocese Commission as it seeks to discern a way forward. Dame Caroline's political skills, love and commitment to the Church of England and to the Gospel make her ideally suited to this role. She's already started a round of regional meetings with bishops and diocesan secretaries. The Commission has considered the approval of 8 suffragan sees and is working closely with the Bishop of St Edmundsbury and the Transforming Effectiveness Simpler Services team to promote best practices to the diocese regarding improving working together arrangements. I do hope this will meet with enthusiastic approval. I would like to thank Dame Caroline most warmly for agreeing to be nominated. She is the right person, I believe, at the right time to help us with the many questions we face and which have been alluded to already this morning. Therefore, Synod, Archbishop Stephen and I wish formally to propose that Dame Caroline Spellman be reappointed as Chair of the Diocese Commission.
This item is now open to members to speak to. From the outset, the speech limit is limited to 3 minutes. I call, therefore, on Paul Benfield, followed by Joyce Jones.
Paul Benfield, Blackburn 66. I wish to support this motion. I should declare an interest as I am Vice Chair of the Diocese Commission. When Professor Michael Clark resigned as Chair due to ill health in 2018, it fell to me to take over as Acting Chair, and so it was with relief that I learned of the appointment of Dame Caroline as Chair last April. She has picked up the baton with considerable skill and dexterity. It is not always understood, even in Lambeth Palace and Church House, even in Lambeth Palace and Church House, it is not always understood that the Diocese Commission is not a committee of this synod, nor a committee of the Archbishop's Council. It is an independent statutory body with a statutory constitution and statutory functions. As such, it is subject to judicial review in the High Court. I am confident that under Dame Caroline's leadership, the Commission will conduct its business in a manner which will not lead to an appearance in court. I support this motion.
Joyce Jones, followed by the gentleman in front of me.
Joyce Jones, Leeds 136. I'd like to warmly welcome the appointment of Dame Caroline Spellman as Chair of the Commission. I know Synod appreciate her input as Second Estates Commissioner, and it's good to have her back. However, I note the Commission has a busy agenda for the next few years. I'd like to ask whether that includes the amalgamation of dioceses, and if so, will the lessons, both positive and negative, learned from the creation of the Diocese of Leeds be taken into account?
Stephen Hogg, Leeds 328. If I may pick up the Archbishop of Canterbury's words, I enthusiastically support the appointment of Dame Caroline. I'm aware of the Commission's current heavy workload, and I think we're all aware there's a lot of stuff going on, reviews, things that are leaked to the Times, governance, and many of these may lead to more demands on the work of the Diocese Commission. It strikes me the Commission could be overwhelmed with demands, and I wonder what plans are in place to cope with that peak requirement, both of members and of staff. And I would look for some assurance that Dame Caroline and the Commission will be properly supported and resourced. Thank you.
I see no one else indicating a wish to speak, and so I ask the Archbishop to respond.
Thank you very, very much for those comments. Justin Welby, I didn't say this last time. Justin Welby, Canterbury 1. How long have I got, Chair?
Oh, up to 5 minutes. Please don't use them all.
It's just you didn't say. Otherwise, I could go on forever. I'm very grateful for the comments. I particularly hope that on behalf of the Synod and oh, it was a sneeze. I sympathise. I thought it was a point of order. I simply wanted to say that I wanted to start by, and I hope I speak on behalf of the Synod, and I hope the Chair will allow us to indicate agreement with this, if we indicate, to say how much we would like to thank Father Paul Benfield for his long service as on the Commission and as Vice Chair. He certainly took it over at a time of sudden and difficult time and handled it very well indeed. We are immensely grateful. And I can assure the Synod that if I ever, speaking from Lambeth Palace, I can't possibly speak for Church House, but if I ever had any doubts that the Diocese Commission was totally independent, they were put firmly away when Paul was acting chair. So that point is taken. Joyce, thank you very much for your question. It is an independent body, as we've been reminded, and therefore it will pursue the agenda that that it chooses to pursue. And I can't give you an assurance on behalf of an independent body. However, we will, from Lambeth Palace and I'm sure Church House, very nervously, cautiously, and without in any way seeking to undermine its independence, tentatively seek to put into its mind the possibility that it might eventually look at some of the possible papers that might come to it from sources other than those published in the Times. I trust that the Bishop of Ely is approving of my comments. Yeah, he is. Good. So they will do what they like, and we will do what we must, to quote my speech the other day. And finally, thank you very much for the question about resourcing. It's an extremely valid one. Staffing is, however, a matter for the Secretary-General, William Nye, and central support. And we will certainly do all we can to make sure that they are adequately resourced. I beg to move.
Thank you. Therefore, we now put item 17 to the vote, which I intend to do by a show of hands in the chamber. Green ticks by those who are joining us online. Would all those in favour of this motion please show? Thank you. All those against, please show in the chamber by red crosses online. Thank you. That item is passed. And we congratulate Dame Caroline on her reappointment. This item is now closed and we are adjourned for lunch.